Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Civilian deaths trigger rift over NATO's Libya campaign. Bahrain court sentences 9 activists to life. And Syrian minister defends Hezbollah and accuses al-Qaeda of killing security forces. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
China said it considers the Libyan Transitional National Council to be an important participant in the dialogue regarding the Libyan issue. This came after a delegation from the council held discussions in the Chinese capital.
In Rome, the Italian foreign minister called for immediately suspending NATO operations in Libya in order to build channels to help civilians.
The French Foreign Ministry said that any suspension of operations, albeit temporary, would give Gaddafi a chance to gain time and regroup his forces.
Misrata has been shelled for weeks. Even though the shelling did not cause any casualties, the battalion's message is clear that the city is still their main goal. The revolutionaries, who began making some progress in western Libya, said they took control of an airbase located south of the city and seized equipment and ammunition. However, the battalions have reinforced their deployment on the western fronts toward the city of Daphnia in an attempt to storm Misrata and retake control of its entrances. In the Naima region, not far from Misrata and close to Zlitan city, residents are suffering from a suffocating siege that has led to a scarcity of supplies, water, and electricity. In addition, a number of youths who refuse to leave the city have been arrested. In Tripoli, revolutionaries said that the city is also suffering from severe shortages of food and gasoline. Tripoli is also witnessing intensified security measures after revolutionaries in the city resumed their actions and carried out a number of quality operations against battalion members. While the revolutionaries talk of a looming fiscal crisis, their diplomatic efforts continue to be exerted to gain more support. Head of the Executive Bureau for the Libyan Revolutionaries, Mahmoud Jibril, has just finished his visit to Beijing. The Chinese Foreign Ministry said that it considered the Transitional National Council to be an important participant in the dialogue and made no further remarks. This coincided with statements by the capitals of European countries. It seems that the prolonged Libyan crisis has exhausted the political efforts. Italian Foreign Minister Franco Frattini is calling for an immediate suspension to the military operations in Libya in order to build humanitarian aid channels to help civilians. Furthermore, Frattini requested detailed information of NATO's operations and called for clear and specific instructions after what he referred to as dramatic mistakes were made that led to civilian fatalities. This comes as the U.S. Congress is discussing resolutions to allow limited operations in Libya amid pressure from a number of representatives who oppose allocating funds to the Libyan military operations without Congress's approval. For his part, Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Moussa said that there should be a ceasefire in Libya and that all parties should resort to a political settlement. Moussa also expressed his reservations about NATO's operations because he saw children killed in the NATO strikes on military bases in Tripoli. The only one that did not advocate the calls for a political solution is British Prime Minister David Cameron, who announced the possibility of Britain's continued stay in Libya as long as the situation calls for it.
Syrian Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim completely denied that there was any military intervention by Iran or Hezbollah in the events on the ground. Instead, he said that al-Qaeda was likely to be behind the killing of Syrian security soldiers.
Yes, there is political support from Iran and Hezbollah for Syria in order to overcome this crisis.
وهناك دعم للإصلاحات التي أعلنها السيد الرئيس. لكن
There's also support for the reforms that the president has announced. But there is not any military support on the ground.
أن بعض الممارسات التي شاهدناها في بعض المحافظات
I will not deny that certain practices that we have witnessed in some provinces, which involve killing security members and mutilating their bodies, give an indication that such actions are taken by al-Qaeda.
In Syria, dissidents continue to call on their supporters to participate in a general strike tomorrow. The streets of Homs and Hama saw massive demonstrations amid a funeral for a number of victims in the continuous protests calling for the toppling of the regime.
On
the eve of a general strike called for by Syrian dissidents in various parts of the country, Syrians held funerals in Hama and Homs for a number of victims who fell in the acts of violence by the regime's forces. The funerals turned into massive demonstrations during which anti-regime slogans were chanted. Social networking websites also released videos from Hama showing thousands of Syrians rallying in front of the Palace of Justice, shouting slogans against Assad's regime. Also in Hama, dozens of female protesters chanted slogans demanding freedom and criticizing the president's cousin, Rami Makhlouf. In this context, nightly protests continued in a majority of Syrian cities and towns. Protesters chanted slogans calling for democracy and the toppling of the regime. This video shows protesters in Duma setting fire to a picture of President Bashar al-Assad. These actions came after another bloody day during which the Syrian security forces' gunfire led to a number of casualties. Meanwhile, both pro- and anti-government demonstrations were organized in the country. Reports repeatedly spoke of clashes erupting at Damascus University between students supporting President Assad and students against him. Security forces stormed the campus and gunfire was heard. A number of people were killed or wounded. Dozens of students were arrested and the dissidents' websites published their names. The dissident website named The Syrian Revolution mentioned that on Tuesday, Syrian security forces abducted 2 Syrian activists, Hossein Touamin and Mahmoud Wanousa. The security forces tried to run over the 2 activists, who were riding a motorcycle in the town of Hamouriya in Rif Dimashq, before they kidnapped them. On the economic front, alongside these developments on the ground, dissident websites circulated videos showing long lines of residents waiting at gas stations. The websites said that the real crisis, reflected in a shortage of material supplies, indicates that the Syrian regime is nearing its downfall. As for the issue of Syrian refugees in Turkey, reports said that some families gradually began to return to Jisr Shugur. Meanwhile, the Turkish Emergency Management Directorate expanded the scope of its humanitarian aid to the Syrian side of the border, where over 10,000 refugees are waiting to cross into Turkish territory.
وبالتزامن مع زيارة تفقدية أجراها دبلوماسيون أجانب في أنقرة إلى إقليم هاتاي التركي حيث
Coinciding with the inspection visit by foreign diplomats from Ankara to the Turkish region of Hatay, where thousands of refugees are massing, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees said that Jisr Shugur and its surrounding villages appeared to be half deserted during a tour of the region organized by Syrian authorities.
إلى الشأن البحريني حيث أصدرت محكمة عسكرية في البحرين.
A Bahraini military court has issued life sentences to 9 prominent opposition activists. In addition, the court sentenced many others to several years in prison. The verdicts were immediately followed by protest rallies in various parts of the country amid the authorities' crackdown.
إصرار الشعب البحريني على تحقيق أهدافه في الحصول على الحرية تجسد خلال
In their quest to achieve their objectives for freedom, the Bahraini people have called for staging protest rallies across the country. A protest rally dubbed Loyalty to the National Activists Behind the Regime's Bars was held in the area of Diyah. The protesters chanted slogans calling for the immediate release of the prisoners and for an end to the campaign of crackdowns. In addition, hundreds of people held protest rallies in the areas of Nabi Saleh and Sitla Island, demanding the release of prisoners. Residents of Samahij and Barbar have also taken to the streets in solidarity with the detainees. The protesters condemned the military court's trials against the participants of the peaceful demonstrations. The Bahraini people, who have been staging protests for months, are resorting to new methods of resistance against the repressive authorities. Many areas of the country, including Sanabis, Damistan, and Karzakan, and others, witnessed a general strike. Businesses and shops were closed. In response, the authorities mobilized its security forces throughout the country. The regime forces pursued protesters in the streets and alleys and fired poison gas at them, inflicting many casualties.
We fear that there will be more death sentences. 2 of our sons in Bahrain were sentenced to death. These verdicts are unjust and unfair. We urge the international community to mount pressure on this defiant government.
Meanwhile, the February 20th coalition of the Youth Revolution has called for continuous protests in solidarity with the detainees. The coalition issued a statement calling for protests at the beginning of the week, referred to as Loyalty to the National Activists. The coalition called for the closure of public streets, especially busy ones. They also called for staging massive protests against the military trials, which they described as illegitimate and invalid. The coalition called for staging rallies to express loyalty to the detained leaders. The statement also stressed the importance of organizing massive women's rallies, marking the Day of Women of the Revolution as part of their loyalty to the national movement.
أعرب مركز البحرين لحقوق الإنسان عن قلقه لتعرض.
The Bahraini Human Rights Center expressed concern over the military trials of hundreds of Bahrainis due to their participation in the peaceful protests. The center said in a statement that nearly 200 civilians have been put on trial before military courts since the declaration of the state of emergency on March 15, 2011. In addition, more than 90 people have received prison or death sentences.
Iran's foreign ministry has summoned Bahrain's charge d'affaires to protest what it calls illegal restrictions imposed on Iranian nationals by Manama. The ministry has condemned such attitudes by the Bahraini government, calling them a violation of international conventions. Tehran also called on Bahraini authorities to respect the rights of Iranian nationals in that country. Meanwhile, a foreign ministry official denies reports that Bahrain's king has sent a special envoy to Tehran. He said Iran supports diplomatic moves that would fulfill the legitimate demands of the Bahraini people.
In Yemen, anti-regime protesters once again took to the streets in several cities across the country, calling for a transitional council. Well, people in the capital Sana'a held a rally calling for a council representing the revolutionaries to establish a new government. People in other cities, including Ib, Taiz, and Aden, also participated in demonstrations. They demand the ouster of Ali Abdullah Saleh. He is currently in Saudi Arabia undergoing treatment for injuries sustained in an attack on his palace earlier this month. According to people close to Saleh, he plans on returning to Yemen, but the chief of the largest tribe in Yemen, Sadiq al-Ahmar, has called on Riyadh not to let Saleh return. Al-Ahmar has warned that Yemen will head to a civil war if he returns. Yemen has been rocked by a nationwide uprising against Saleh's decades-long rule. According to a survey, Pakistan's economy has suffered direct and indirect losses of nearly $68 billion due to its role as a frontline state on the war against terrorism. Our correspondent in Pakistan has the details.
The geographical landscape of South Asia forever changed following the events of the attacks on the Twin Towers in the United States in 2001. The US-led invasion of Afghanistan has worsened the security environment in Pakistan, spreading the war on terror into the country's settled areas, taking the lives of over 35,000 Pakistani citizens. Pakistan's major opposition parties blast President Zardari and his government for its growing unpopular pro-American foreign policy.
We will have to detach ourselves from this war on terror. This has nothing to do with the interest of people of Pakistan. This has nothing to do with the interest of, as a state, Pakistani state. Americans should safeguard their own interest, and we should safeguard our interest. We should be basically for the interest of Pakistan and interest for the people of Pakistan.
All problems, including whether it was Vietnam problem issue, whether it was the dispute in Korea, or other disputes, every dispute is finally settled across the table.
The Economic Policy Review document reveals that the so-called US-led war on terror has affected Pakistan's exports, prevented inflow of foreign investment, affected the pace of the privatization program, and slowed down the overall economic activity. The document estimates Pakistan's direct and indirect losses of $67.93 billion due to its role as a frontline state in the war against terrorism.
There is a growing realization in Islamabad and in different parts of the country that if we want to renegotiate even a relationship with the United States, we need trade rather than aid. We need clear, demarcated terms of engagement and rules of engagement.
According to the survey, at the start of the war, the estimated cost of Pakistan was $2.66 billion in the fiscal year 2001 to 2002. The economy was subjected to enormous direct and indirect costs, which caused devastating social and economic upheaval. The destruction of physical infrastructure, both military and civil, and the massive surge in security-related funding has also put a massive burden on an already fragile and ailing national exchequer.
Our priority is to achieve national reconciliation. These were the words of Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad, who said that he won't be an obstacle to the Palestinian reconciliation. Fayyad said that he is willing to withdraw his nomination for the upcoming Prime Minister position if it continues to be a source of disagreement between Hamas and Fatah. During a press conference, Fayyad said that under no circumstances will he impose on anyone. Fatah nominated Fayyad nearly a week ago to head the upcoming national unity government. However, Hamas quickly rejected his nomination. Joining us directly from Ramallah is Dr. Mustafa al-Barghouthi, the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative. Dr. Mustafa, welcome. Current Prime Minister Salam Fayyad said that he will not run for a second term because he doesn't want to be an obstacle to national reconciliation. Will this end the Palestinian rift?
It's not clear so far, especially considering that the Palestinian president is still rallying behind Salam Fayyad as he nominated him for the post. In my opinion, the issue of the government and the prime minister has received more attention than it deserves. We are talking about a temporary transitional government with limited authority and responsibility. Its task is important, but limited by a schedule. The government will prepare for the upcoming elections and help launch the reconstruction efforts in the Gaza Strip, in addition to lifting the siege imposed on it. Due to its limited responsibilities, the government must be formed quickly. There's no time to waste. The candidates must be mutually approved by the national consensus. This is what is needed right now. In the end, the Palestinian people are the ones who will select the prime minister through elections.
The
problem right now has to do with the prime minister. Will this rift jeopardize the entire process of Palestinian reconciliation? Or should we separate the issue of reconciliation from the issue of the formation of the government?
No, there's an imminent danger on the reconciliation initiative. We are currently exerting tremendous efforts in a bid to rescue the reconciliation deal, which is facing grave danger. Frankly, I believe the real danger facing the reconciliation stems from foreign intervention and pressure led by Israel and some of its international allies. They are seeking to impose conditions in order to hamper the implementation of the reconciliation initiative. This includes putting pressure on the Council of Ministers, the Legislative Council, as well as the PLO Committee. The committee is set to convene in an attempt to form a unified leadership, represented by all Palestinian blocs. All of these issues are at stake. Certain foreign groups don't want to see us united.
We open with today's nationwide drill that sent millions of Israelis into air raid shelters and protected rooms when sirens blared at 11 o'clock this morning. Codenamed Operation Turning Point 5, the 5-day exercise has been testing the capabilities of over 80 separate authorities, including emergency rescue services, the police, and the military, in coping with the worst-case scenario involving a possible missile attack from Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. We get more in this report from IBA's Batat.
At 11 a.m. this morning, government, security, and police authorities simulated some of our worst nightmares, with Israel coming under massive attack, including that of unconventional weaponry. Kindergarten and school children were told to seek cover as they rushed down to shelters. Rescue teams practiced the evacuation of a geriatric hospital near Tel Aviv and of a factory containing hazardous materials, as well as the evacuation of hundreds of people trapped under collapsed buildings. This while various medical institutions prepared for the treatment of thousands of casualties. Crews at the Asaf Arafeh Hospital took part in a scenario which involved a chemical warhead attack on the nearby city of Rishon LeZion. On hand to view the medical teams in action were some 100 international observers who came to get a close look of the methods of operation. Israel, they said, is considered a leading expert in handling emergency situations and serves as a model for many countries. The entire political and military command also took part in the exercise. The Security Cabinet held a special session in a secret location in an underground bunker somewhere in the outskirts of Jerusalem. The ministers were asked not to bring any assistance in order to keep the location confidential. Dozens of spokespeople from a wide range of government and security bodies simulated how they would operate to keep the public informed. Officials also tested a new cell phone alert system that can deliver specific warnings to residents of the exact areas which are under missile attack. An additional siren will be heard in just about 2 hours from now at 7 p.m. This in order to give families at home an opportunity to practice their own plan of action under attack. The Home Front Command is strongly advising all people to prepare and familiarize themselves with their safe rooms and shelters, stressing that in the event of a potential disaster, this will be the #1 means of protection. The ongoing exercise will officially come to a close tomorrow. The Home Front Command is expected to assess the public's response to the drill in the upcoming days. Officials hope that the rate of participation, which on average stands between 50 to 55%, will indeed grow this time around. This is Batat for IBA News.
Violence against women in Pakistan is spreading, and while reasons for the phenomenon vary, revenge remains the main motive, rendering women part of the conflict and subject to persecution. Abdullah Abu Halala reports from the village of Haripur in Pakistan.
This village seems like a ghost town after it was abandoned by most of its men and residents, who escaped either due to shame or fear of getting caught. The incident took place at night in the alleys of the village when 50-year-old Shahnaz Bibi was assaulted and beaten.
A number of people with machine guns stormed in. They dragged me outside of the house by force and immediately started beating me and tearing off all my clothes in front of the village's residents. Then they paraded me naked through the alleys of the village before letting me go.
The punishment Shahnaz Bibi was subjected to was not because of a sin she committed. It was for revenge against one of her sons for an unproven allegation of having an illegitimate relationship with a villager's wife.
I told them not to do it. They said, "You are an imam and this matter doesn't concern you, so do not intervene." They said they will set fire to everyone who dares to stop us or intervene. I wasn't able to do anything.
This is the excuse, according to the imam of the village, for which the residents did not intervene to help Shahnaz Bibi or even inform the police. Shahnaz Bibi opted for leaving the village and never returning after the trauma and shame she was subjected to in light of her husband's absence. However, her young son witnessed what happened.
After what happened to me, I cannot stay in the village. My life has become hell. I used to belong to a respected family. Now I can't see my siblings or relatives.
The police who accidentally learned of the incident were able to arrest some of the accused, but several others remain at large. In Pakistan, aggression against women over the disputes is now commonplace. Perpetrators receive the death penalty or life imprisonment. However, in a society that highly values honor, Shahnaz said the arrest of the attackers will not compensate for her tragedy. Abdullah Abu Halala, BBC Haripur. The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic.
This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world.